What is going on, people of the internet? It is Mighty Fine back with this week's weekly analysis. It is November the 12th, so midweek of November. After a moderately rangy week last week, we're gonna really the past couple of weeks it's been a bit ranged out. Hopefully, we start to see the pullback we discussed last week in the weekly analysis is coming to a culmination, and we'll possibly get some new trend. Hopefully we don't see price on dollar, what we have on our screen right now, just come back up into this large consolidation up here, up into this range in the mid 106s. So that's kind of the fingers crossed. We have some big information coming out this week as well. Last week was a lot of speculation around US Fed monetary policy decisions and stuff. People were waiting on Jerome Powell to come and advise, and he shocked the markets a little bit. He said that they may not be done with rate hikes in this hike cycle. If you've been listening to me for the past couple of months here on this YouTube channel, you understand that I've been calling that as well. I didn't think that we were going to have rate cuts definitely into this year, but maybe not even into next year. I thought it was moderately unlikely that that happened. And the reason why is we really aren't seeing a huge impact of the current monetary policy changes, the tightening from the US Fed. We're not seeing a lot of effect on the broader economy, and it's sort of softening the labor market a little bit, but not really, and inflation staying pretty high. So on that note, even if you don't understand any of what I just said, what you need to know this week is that we have a CPI coming up. And if you are watching any event this week, watch the CPI, because the core pricing index helps us see how much goods used to cost and how much they cost now, which is a direct measurement of inflation. So it's going to be a really big, impactful piece of data. I highly suggest that you keep an eye on that. So that's that from the fundamental side. If you want some more fundamental recap stuff, check out that free Discord. Link is below this video if you're not already in there. I have a channel that's dedicated to a recap of what happened last week, just the major bullet points from all the biggest currencies. It's very helpful for aspiring traders. So let's dive into the technicals of all this stuff. If you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about along the way, please feel free to leave a comment below this. I'm happy to answer it. I will do so promptly. Looking at DXY here, just on the daily, we can see that, really we had a bunch of consolidation here, a bunch of consolidation. Then price sort of came up and swept this supply right here and tapped into that upper block. We call that a mitigation. Price came up to that, and now we broke lower. So this is an important break right here in theory. We should see price pull up relative to this, either here or up into that upper area of supply, and then create some sort of transition and in smaller time frame intraday bearish flow, where it should then create new lows past this wick and potentially down into one of these other zones if the trend of the transition is going to hold true. Now, the dollar's been quite resilient and strong, so it may not fully happen, but last week we talked about it was very likely going to need some sort of pullback, and it turns out all week was a pullback last week, in theory. There's a lot of money that's pointing down from here to here, quite a bit. And if we look at something like let's just say the weekly chart, we can see that in theory, we have quite a bit of room that we can still pull back against this. In order for that to happen, in order to get this deeper retracement relative to the, sort of 90-day long bullish trend, we're going to have to see a break below this new low. That's going to be an indicator that we are going to get a deeper pullback. We also need to stay below this area of daily supply. And so that's sort of why the high time frames are so important right now specifically, is where within this current leg, within this right here, are we going to get a pullback? Where are we going to see price pull back into? What makes sense in terms of a major pocket of liquidity that we might see price bump up into and then potentially see some sort of reversal? Because if we are going to get that big deep pullback from here or from here, let's just say we get it from here down into the next couple of zones, is a few hundred pips, anywhere from 180, 190 to 250 plus 300s. So that could be a really, monumental opportunity if you time that correctly. And I think it's an important thing to watch as we come into this week, and maybe even into next week. Now, if instead of this we get this break to the upside here and it pushes up and even higher, then this thing was just a big, oh, this is the pullback if that's the case. So let's just make a note. If price gets above this, then this was the pullback relative to the bullish weekly flow, and we change our high time frame bias to bullish on dollar. If instead we see price reject and transition to bearish flow within the daily flow leg that we just talked about, then the bias for short to medium term is bearish, seen as a retracement to the weekly trend. Boom. So that's sort of your two scenarios. Now, the question really is, where do we want to pay attention to? I'm just going to make it easy for you. You want to pay attention to the daily supply up here where this first eyeball is. If we get a break past this, this is the really important one right now. And we may see it kind of mess around a little bit, tap slight above it, and then, sort of overshoot and reject or whatever. But this is the first area that I really want to pay attention to. And the reason why is, if you look at it, this is where there was a big injection of money that broke us out of this range to the downside. So a lot of money was injected here for a reason. Okay. Now, that is pretty clearly sensible, I think. So we'll watch this area very, very closely. If you want to set an alert, this is a 106.08 is where we start to get into this 4-hour supply. You can build it off of this white candle right here if you're looking at the same chart on the 4-hour. Pretty much just wick to wick high here. That represents your whole thing. I believe I actually found this on the the 8-hour chart. I just grabbed this section here, but even if you had it something like that, I think that would be good. I like to go a little bit more broad personally. So that's step one. Where might we target for the dollar? And this is going to help build our bias and form our opinion on all our major pairs, right? So that's sort of step one. Step two, I have a couple of things just labeled in here. I like to break down the transitions and stuff that I can see here. We had a secondary transitional phase after price kind of pushed up and broke that intraday flow here. So price pushed down. We switched flow here with an H1 break of flow, and then price came up and entered the secondary phase where we had a lot of volatility, and then price just kept on cruising up. Pullback wasn't done yet. So here's a couple of things that I want to watch. I want to watch this range because we're sort of in the secondary phase again here. And then I want to watch this as my major intraday demand. So what does that mean? If price breaks below this level here, then I would anticipate that we will pull back relative to this large bullish push that we had from Thursday into the end of Thursday of last week. Now, if instead we get a break higher, then we're just going to keep on cruising, and this was just some sort of reaccumulation. So we will watch this upper zone anyways, okay? So a break below this, potentially here down into this area, this is going to be our sort of real significant H4 demand. And the H4 demand is sort of like our intra-week structure, if you want to think about it like that. So if price goes below this area, sellers are most definitely taking control, because that's going to require that we get a flow switch on the smaller detailed charts of the day. We would have to see something like, for example, a break of, this level, this H1 demand that I was just talking about, and we would probably see order flow come down into that, where this is now either a break or bounce situation. And then we can come back down and retack this. This is really why it's so important to stay fluid on your time frames and use multiple time frames to be able to paint that picture and understand what the details of the H1 mean in relation to the H4 major levels, or the H4 levels in relation to the daily and the weekly, so on and so forth. So Just a free little educational gem there for you. Watching this level here, certainly. I will also be watching this as my flow high. So there is that. And that's really going to kind of just be our basics for the week. We ended the week a bit sideways after Jerome Powell spoke. He shook some shit up on Thursday and created a bunch of volatility, but he came out and said, hey, we might not be done with rate hikes yet. For some reason, that's still positive for the dollar, which is crazy. Yeah, if we break into a flow high, watch this for a major breaker bounce. This is pretty much a no trade zone here unless you're going long dollar. Any break above the H4 level here, I start to think more long dollar, and you'll have to trade it based on the intraday flow, like your 1 hour, your 2 hour charts. Any break below the intraday low time frame major demand I have labeled here, I'll look for a retracement back into this. I may look, if that were to line up appropriately with sessions, I may look to take a short back into this area, but then I want to watch very carefully because there's a huge amount of buyers that were occurring here, and we haven't quite tapped into that H4 yet. If instead we got something like this, where we see sort of price come up, dip up into the area here, and then break flow in some fashion, create a new flow to the downside, this in theory is what we want to see for the week. If we saw that, we want to take this play because that's going to be a new potential trend leg on things like EU, GU, AU, or even Nasdaq, the main pairs that I like to watch. So that's, you know, kind of it for the dollar. And the reason I'm going so in depth on this week and today is because this is really what sets the tempo and helps build all the ideas for the other pairs that we're going to take a look at now. Looking at things like Euro USD, we can see that we needed some form of pullback here on the daily. Looks like we might be getting that. We could still go a little bit deeper here. As you see, we'll go to the 4 hour actually. Still have some room to run to the downside into this H4 major demand. We had a break and retest here on the H1 sort of major demand, a little continuation demand here, but perfect wick up Thursday on Powell. It's funny how this stuff works. It's almost like it's preordained. It is. That's a secret. We're looking to see if price can stay below this area now here. And we just want to see if price can break into a new flow low and keep that retracement going. If so, I would wait for this H4 demand to get hit there, and then see if you get a transition into bullish flow, transition into bearish flow on the dollar at the same time. Anything above that starts to look more bullish. I would be careful. That's the light green is bullish but careful. And above that is ultimately going to be leaning significantly more bullish above the previous highs here, above the previous trend high. So pretty much the opposite of the dollar analysis, and that's going to hold true for things like the British pound as well, something that I like to trade a little bit more closely. We had a break of intraday major demand up there that created the start to this pullback. This one I think is in an interestingly precarious spot. Friday came down and wicked perfectly into my zone in zone that I provide for all my members in my analysis. But this came back into that H4 demand that I had highlighted last week. You can see with the eyeball as well, this area here. Told you guys to keep an eye out for that. If we do get a transition off of this level, I think this is acutely interesting. We're looking for price action to break above that and create some sort of order flow to the upside, where we will then watch this area here. If price can get above that, then we have room to run up into this area here and theoretically higher, right? So if this lines up with the dollar and it looks good, we get a bearish transition on the dollar, bullish transition on this, I think this could be really good. Now, if instead the dollar starts going bullish and pushes down lower, we're waiting for a break below the current wick low and to see what happens in the daily demand zone. Anything below the daily demand zone here, I'm starting to feel a lot more bearish about this pair, and that probably would mean that the dollar is going to break into new highs. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We haven't had any good trending price action for a hot minute, especially this month. So I would personally love to see some bearish trend on the dollar. And that would be good for things like the stock market and these other currencies as well. In theory, it would make sense with the high time frames. We need a deeper pullback relative to that weekly chart that we started out with. So what I'm looking for sort of the canary in the coal mine here, that the hint that we may be getting that transition would just simply be a break of this level, something like that. Anything above this, we'll start to get that transition on upwards a little bit. Then again, we kind of want to just watch this area here. I can actually slice that way. Yeah, you get the point. I don't want that to be in the way of it, but that's your current H4 flow leg there. So that part. If you get a break above this, you're trading relative to the H4 leg, and we'll kind of go from there. I would love to see a bullish move on this. I think it would be really good. Aussie dollar, same sort of situation. It went even deeper, just barely missed this daily demand zone down here. And again, we could see that deeper pullback, but when we start to look at things like the weekly chart, we can see that we had a slight crack weekly break of flow here, break above this major supply zone, but then price came right back down. I'm not super sold on this one yet, because all last week we had this big pullback, and we haven't had any sort of real demand formed along the way. Now, if we so happen to see a break of the H1 supply here, you know, we could label it something like this: 1 hour supply. Anything above this is going to switch us into potentially bullish flow. Like I said, again, we haven't gotten a crack up into that, but maybe we were sort of misrepresenting the demand there. That could very possibly be the case. If we get a transition out of here, very interesting. Anything below daily demand, however, very bearish. Okay, so interesting special area here, theoretically, possibly looking more bearish above that. And then we just want to watch sort of the H4 demand zone, I'm sorry, H4 supply zone, excuse me, right up here that I will mark out now. You can see that I had some directional indicators here. And again, guys, just illustrating how much this works. When price broke below that, I said it's, you know, obviously a key level. And if you can identify key levels well, then you can start to build good trade ideas. And that's exactly what we're doing. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at for that there. Waiting for some sort of pullbacks on all of these, or some sort of transitions into a new flow. If we do get an intra-week trend change, if we get a direction change from bearish last week on AU, GU, or EU into a more bullish flow, and then a bearish flow here on the dollar, I think it's going to be an important catch. You just have to time it correctly. So definitely going to be watching for that as we progress into this week. That'll be a key one. Last thing that I want to talk about here really is Nasdaq, which is just an absolute train of bullish momentum right now. Heading up into the daily, we can see that we had this big break to the upside, and this is one of the reasons that I'm sort of thinking that we might be having a deeper pullback on the dollar is when we start to go look at this. This thing may have been the pullback. Now we're getting a weekly flow switch, huge bullish week, and then another bullish week to back it up. Now we're going to need some sort of retracement, I would assume, but this thing doesn't always retrace deeply. So it may just be sort of an intraday thing, and this keeps going. It looks like we kind of already printed that. You can see price came back down into this order block and then created a transition and a 400 pip move to the upside. Absolute beefcake of a move. This is our current flow high here. This acts as our sort of major intra-week demand if you were to do something like this, right? And then as we get into the slightly smaller time frames, there's really nothing for us to pinpoint in terms of this move. We had some pretty interesting liquidity that you can see right here as well. So this would be one area that I would watch. Let's put an eyeball there. Watch this, and then watch that level as well. In theory, this is where we got that expansion from, so that's the reasoning behind that. And yeah, just waiting for some sort of pullback or some sort of reaccumulation phase, and this thing should keep cooking and booking so long as the dollar starts to come down again. And that's it for the free version of my analysis for the week. I'm going to go record my members only version and send them a bunch of charts and stuff as well. If this is something that you enjoy, give me a thumbs up on this video, man. It helps me spread it to other people, and it gets suggested to other people as a learning resource. I appreciate your guys' support. We've had a lot of new followers in the past couple of months. I'm trying to be consistent with this. So if there's anything that you want to learn, or any other, pairs that you might want to suggest, drop me a comment below. Say what's up, show love. Appreciate you guys very, very much. I'm on vacation this week over in Hawaii, so gonna be a little bit quiet for me, but I'll be back next weekend, most likely. And if you're trading this week, trade smart and trade safe. Have a great week. Peace.